Alright, welcome to another movie review stream. My name is Mark McPherson, film critic for movieswithmark.com, filminquiry.com, and TwinCitiesGeek.com. So you can read any of my reviews over there, or just watch them on here, wherever. Whichever you prefer. If you prefer to listen or read, rather you do both, but whichever works. Alright, so we're right in the middle of summer movie season right now, so a lot to catch up on. So we're going to address three fairly big films today, not as big as the ones that we covered last 2 weeks ago, but still some pretty big ones. We've got the new Pixar film Elemental. We'll be covering that. We'll also be covering the new horror satire / parody, kind of somewhere between satire and parody, called The Blackening. And then we'll also be taking a look at Wes Anderson's new film, Asteroid City, which is currently in limited release right now in a few cities, and it will be having a wide release this weekend. Elemental and The Blackening, of course, debuted last weekend. So we're going to be catching up on that. So if you... if you want to, check out any of the written reviews I have over on the other sites, you can go over there. We do have the Patreon, in which I do keep people updated on the latest books that I'm writing, as well as all the scripts that I'm doing here. And there's a few other videos in the works that I'm working on in between. I've got a whole bunch of scripts in the backlog that I'm working on. So we got all that covered. All right. So let's get right into covering the latest film. Let's see, maybe we'll just start with Elemental. I'm debating which one is gonna throw my voice out fastest. And probably the sweet little Pixar film probably won't do that. It probably won't. Okay, let's get the notes up here and make sure I got everything set up. And in case anyone's wondering, yes, I am aware of the low box office. It was very, very low box office disappointments last weekend between The Flash and Elemental. Yeah, which is sad because I got a lot of good stuff to say about Elemental. Flash, I can take or leave. Okay, so let's get my notes up here. They're all set up. Okay. And 3, 2, here we go, 1. So Elemental is the latest animated film from Pixar, and it's the type of Pixar film that I wish they would keep making more of. You know, I feel like I say that every time there's a great Pixar film, but it's like it's one of those things that you kind of got to like reinstate to let the studio know it's like, no, I like this stuff, keep doing more of this. And that's specifically why I love Elemental, because it gives the two things that I love. It has the two things that I love about Pixar films, which is that they can introduce like worlds that are not as, showcased in other animated films, and also tap into either a particular genre or a particular emotion that you don't feel as much in other animated films. So in the same way that, a lot of their animation was very like trailblazing, the thematic elements that are trailblazing are also more interesting. And on that level, like the high bar of like Pixar films for me is stuff like Turning Red, I actually really loved, and then stuff like Inside Out, and like and Up and WALL-E, I love those as well. But like somewhere like in between the like and then of course like Cars obviously is on the lower front, it's Cars and Brave, and Elemental exists kind of like just like a notch below like the top tier of Pixar. Like it's not quite there, but it's like you can see aspects of it that come close to what I love about Pixar. So based on like what a lot of people have been seeing with this film, they think it's mostly just going to be like an Element version of Zootopia, where it's this city where all these different types of characters congregate, and there's there's an overlapping nature about the questioning of the diversity within that city and how the city comes together while still appreciating all the wonder of it. That much is true on a visual level. This is like the one thing I love the most about Elemental, is that it doesn't slow itself down to try to like make like a more concrete world. Like Zootopia was fun, but my biggest criticism of Zootopia would be that there's a whole lot of moments where they're just like, oh, we got to slow down, we got to explain how this world works, and we got to take in this side so you understand how all this works. And the way that they just and they basically they turn it into like a cop story, so it's a little bit more of a tactile plot. And within Elemental, I love how it's mostly a story about legacy. It's between like legacy, acceptance, and honesty, and it doesn't slow down for that. Like they don't waste time explaining like all the elements came together and they built this city. We get that much from like the intro, which sets up like this immigration story for this fire family called the Lumens, who have come to Element City, where apparently fire people are not as well regarded in a world that occupies with cloud people, water people, and plant people. And the fire people are not as well regarded, but the Lumens do their best to kind of like make their own way. And they set up this cute little shop, which has its own nice little little bits of like creativity here. Like they obviously, when they have fire, they can take sand and they can form glass, and they can like break down logs and make these neat little designs out of like coal and glass. So all these cool little aspects that you want to take advantage of. But at the core of the story is their daughter Ember, voiced by Leah Lewis. And the thing with Ember is that she's readying herself to take over her dad's business. He's getting older, he's going to retire, but at the same time she's not really used to the job. She can't handle customers, she's not that great at it, and she doesn't actually enjoy it. So naturally that you can see like once like her first temper tantrum happens and like she literally explodes, you can tell like this is going to be her hurdle to conquer. And of course at the same time there's a more immediate problem, which is that there's a leak that they have in their basement, and the city might shut them down because water is seeping into an area where it apparently shouldn't. Because it's weird, like the fire people live in like this area that has like abandoned, what look like abandoned dams, or just like like little, not quite like dams. What am I saying? Like like little areas like where water would pass through. Like it's a different part of the city that has kind of like changed over time. So there's a little bit of a plot here about how like there's an area of water that needs to be patched up and how there's a bureaucracy standing in the way of that. But thankfully it's not just like, because the moment that happened, like, okay, is this just going to be like the standard, like Ember's going to have to work with someone and she's going to have to learn that water and fire can mix. And thankfully, it's not just like that straightforward cop film, because like Zootopia. Because the thing is, this film is actually a romantic drama, and I don't mean romantic comedy, because there isn't a lot of like a lot of rom-com stuff per se between the two leads here, because during the whole leak in the basement, it's discovered by Wade Ripple, who's played by Mamoto Athie. And I love how like they establish like the different cultures of these two characters, and you know, and you know, like they're different personalities that are formed around it. Like Ember's fire-based people are very much about, you know, being spirited and feisty, whereas Wade's water people are all about kind of like wearing your emotions on your sleeve and kind of embracing sadness. Like they're all about tears. Like they even have like a game about how sad you can be, which is pretty cute. And from there, it's mostly just, you know, like on a bigger level, yeah, it's about like saving the block, and that story kind of bookends this whole movie. But at its core, it's mostly just about the relationship between Ember and Wade. And despite, you know, like he's made of water, she's made of fire, they do come together and make steam. I'm trying to avoid that pun about how like their romance is steamy, because it's like, for one, it's not on like a figurative level, but it's barely even that on like the literal level. It's one of those films where it's just like you kind of have to be on board for wanting to see these two characters get together and do come to terms with themselves about, you know, what they want out of just like living up to like the legacy of their family, which isn't like too overbearing, because like, I mean, between like Ember and Wade's families, they don't seem like they're like, I mean, there's aspects of that where like you're expecting, okay, where's like they're gonna be like the racial allegory here, where like, you know, they're gonna be like, you know, like looking down on each other, and there is aspects of that. In particular, Ember's father, Bernie, voiced by Ronnie Del Carmen, really hates water people. He's all about like, I can't stand them. I can't have them. And the weird thing is like I love the design of Bernie, because they give him such a wide face and such a big mouth that it made me think of the flame from Howl's Moving Castle. I think his name was Calcifer. So it's basically kind of like, what if Calcifer got married and had kids and went off to the city to live out his dream. And yeah, like there's a whole bunch of aspects where I love, where you just get to appreciate this world on a visual level, and it doesn't have to explain itself too much. Like from the very first few scenes, like we don't need like a core explanation of like how the transportation works. We can kind of figure that out just by watching it, and like you know, how they reveal it. There's some cute stuff here, like how the cloud people all travel around in like balloons and blimps, and like they'll deflate if like there aren't more passengers who get off at the next stop. So there's cute little aspects like that, and I love that there's very atmospheric moments where you get to kind of appreciate the world alongside the characters. Like I love how Ember kind of tries to find all the fun stuff that she can do to kind of not so much impress Wade, but just kind of like say like, hey, you know, there's some more neat stuff I can do besides burn stuff. Like I love how at one point she finds that, you know, if she touches like crystals, her flame can adopt that color. There's a great sequence where they're hanging out at the beach trying to find some evidence, and of course, since Ember's in the sand, she was like, oh, I can make glass, and I can, you know, form neat little glass sculptures out of this. And then you know, there's funny aspects with Wade being very fluid. You know, there's all kinds of fun stuff you can do with him. I will say that I do like how like this film can kind of have like some fun with its environment as well, while at the same time poking fun at it. Like there are designs that make sense within, like I love the design of Wade's family home, which is just a swimming pool. It's like it's not even like, oh, here's like a little pool section of the apartment. The whole apartment, it's just a big swimming pool, which is cute because like they're all liquid. It doesn't really. There's no need for a floor. In fact, if they did have a floor, they'd probably just fall out of there. So little attention to details like that. But also like just being able to poke fun at it. Like at one point, they need to they want to break into this one place, and it's held back by a chain link fence. So naturally, Wade, being made of water, just goes straight through the fence, and well, actually, no, like yeah, he does go straight through the fence, and Ember just walks right on through and just burns the fence. And while they do that, there's this passing comment like, "Why do we even have this?" Like, I don't know. I guess it keeps the plant people out since they can't change their form. And this is the type of film where it's like, it's not like I said, it's very much a romantic drama, because it's not as heavy on comedy. Like, there are some funny moments, and there are some great world building moments that are very cute. That I actually smiled at quite a bit. But the bulk of this film is mostly just taking in like the beauty and wonder of both the relationship and the different aspects of this world. Like, there's one particular beautiful sequence where Wade leads Ember on an underwater voyage within a bubble, so that she, still has like oxygen for her fire, and it's just gorgeous. Just like every aspect of Element City, like you feel like they could just like fall back on making it very, either grimy or sterile, or just make it like a typical city where they don't have to find all that much clever stuff to do with these different forms of people that all congregate together. But they actually do. There's some great aspects. Like, I love the fact that how there's a train that comes by, and it leaves like a wake of water. I love that the cloud people have their own like kind of like Quidditch basketball type thing that they have going on, which is pretty neat. And just all the little eccentricities that the film never slows down to fully explain. There are moments where we do get a bit of the backstory. We do learn a little bit more of Ember's culture and why it's important to her and why it's important to Bernie. And that's the type of backstory that's good enough, where it's like, okay, you're not bogging us down in this, and the history that's being revealed here makes sense, and it plays a bigger role into feeling that you have to live up to this legacy. And yeah, there's a lot of quiet moments that are just kind of sweet to take in with this film. And honestly, after seeing an animated film like Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, which was amazing, but it was very, very fast paced, very frantic, and every scene is like way too quick and dazzling that like the next time I watch it at home, I'm probably going to be like pausing it a bunch of times. But after all that, coming to something like Elemental is like a perfect chaser, because even though there is a chase as the inciting incident, and there is like a big daring save the block moment where they fear that the neighborhood will be flooded, and there's a race against time, and there's like a dramatic reveal where it seems like a character has died, but there are just like, there are aspects of this film where it's just nice to just lay back and just, let this world kind of, come into being and just like play out the way that it is. So yeah, just on a level of like world building, it's beautiful. Seeing the relationship develop, which it proceeds a little bit too quickly, and I feel like the families are almost a bit too understanding, where like you almost kind of want to have like pardon the pun here, but like a little bit more spark between like the conflict of being about feeling conflicted about this fire and water person getting together. But over time, you kind of actually do feel for them, which at first, like, I wasn't sure if I was going to be liking Wade, because it felt like you just kind of going to be this one note satiric, like this one note like sad sack who, like, he's funny, but he's only funny when he's crying most of the time. But he actually does kind of win you over a little bit when he does share his creativity with Ember, and you watch how they interact and just form a genuine chemistry that it was pretty sweet. So I can definitely tell, like, for the fact that this film is trying to swing more towards, like, you do not see many animated family films that want to have like more of a romantic drama angle to it, as opposed to like a rom-com element. But that's kind of what I want out of Pixar. I want them to test their boundaries and go places that other animated films don't, and this film kind of does. It doesn't pave as much ground as it could with like Like stuff like Inside Out and Turning Red have definitely like set the bar high there. But this is still like a very pleasant, very like solid Pixar film with just like great world building. It's amazing to look at. Every scene is like kind of bursting with color and all these little details that make up the city, where it doesn't just feel like, okay, it looks just like New York City except there's elemental people. No, it actually feels like a city built for these different types of creatures, and watching how they all interact, and rarely having a moment where they just say like, oh, here, like, look at this clever idea we had. Isn't that cute? It just kind of proceeds quickly. It's just like, there's a little bit, okay, look at this neat little thing we did here, but we got to get back to the story here. We got to keep it going. And I feel like Elemental really, really kind of delivers on that front. So yeah, like going back to what I said, like the best way to look at this film is like it's a great chaser for Across the Spider-Verse. If you don't want an animated film that's as frantic and that's actually has a lot of charm and heart to it, and actually slows down to let you appreciate a little bit of like the beauty in it, yeah, Elemental is actually a lot of fun. So Elemental, currently playing in theaters everywhere for a little bit. Like I said, it all depends on on how well the next weekend will be. But definitely, like, it's crowded box office right now. It might hang in there for a while, like, because I mean, like yeah, it's got competition with Across the Spider-Verse, but I mean, it remains to be seen like how long that will last. And it's summer, so family films will have a little bit of legs for a little bit. But yeah, like Elemental has not performed well at the box office, so if you are planning to see it, which you should, it's a very, very sweet film. Plan on doing it sooner rather than later, because it's not going to be around for long. Not going to be around. Okay. So what are we covering next year? Let's cover let's just finish off the rest of the week. Let's just cover the Blackening, Okay. Get my notes up here. Okay. This is another one that I don't think did too well at the box office. Then again, though, it's not a very expensive film, so. Plus, it's horror, so, horror is the cheap and sufficient type of film. Just because it's cheap to make, and they usually make their money back. Okay, let's see if I got all my notes here. I'm just making sure I have all the notes up here, because there's a lot of characters in this one. Okay. Okay. And here we are. Okay. Alright. Whew. So, very hot out. Okay. And in 3, 2, 1. So, The Blackening is a horror comedy in which the entire principal cast is all black, and it's very much like the way that the marketing has promoted this film. It's meant to be kind of like a subversion of like it pokes fun at like the horror cliche of how like the black people always die first. Well, what happens when it's all black people? Like they can't all kill us first, which I believe is the marketing tagline for this. So there's a few ways that this type of film could go. Like it could go like the Scream route, which is like a horror satire where it's a bunch of characters who say, I would not do this in a horror film, and then they kind of end up doing it anyway. Or it could just be like a parody, kind of like, like Scary Movie, in which there's like, silly characters who occupy this world and they kind of poke fun at the horror genre as they go. And The Blackening is actually a kind of a neat mixture of both. At first, it has the staging where it feels like it could be like that type of satire. So the premise is that a bunch of friends are getting together for a big reunion, a big friend reunion, and two of them have come early, and they get picked off by the killer. And the killer kind of taunts them by saying, like, I'll let you live if you can answer this question about, who are the, name a film in which like the black characters do not die. And their answer, they feel like so assured of it, but one of their answers they give is Scream 2, which, for anyone who's up on horror films, the black characters are the first to die in Scream 2. So yeah, like on that level, like first, like you immediately think of Scream because like Scream is also, it's a film about people, who are fairly familiar with horror films, but still make all the same mistakes and still fall into the same motions. And it felt like this was going to be extra meta because like it's a Scream type film that's referencing Scream. So I was a little bit worried. It's like, okay, this might work, but I'm not quite sure where they're going with it here. And thankfully, after that moment, it really picks up when you get to know a lot of the other characters they established here once they get to the reunion at this cabin in the woods, which, of course, is ominous, and, they're a little bit frightened, but at the same time, they just want to reconnect and party. You get to know and like a lot of characters here. You get to know and like, what do you have? You have Allison, played by Grace Breers, who's mixed race, but it gets brought up by the group at all times. You have Clifton, who's kind of like a free spirit, a little bit introspective, but just like kind of like a casual, like, weathered partying type of person. You have King, who is from what I can remember, like King was like the guy who I think it was King, or wasn't it? There are so many characters in this, but suffice to say, like there's a mixed race person, there's like an introspective free spirited person, there's oh my god, I think it was, oh my goodness, sorry, brain fart there, hang on, I'm gonna have to start that bit over. See, this is why I had the notes up, because, like, I know I'm going to screw it up, because, like, this is a big cast, and, like, I can remember all, like, the characters based on their personalities. It's not that I can't remember that, it's just I'm trying to remember their specific names that they give here. Let me just give a moment to check on my notes here. If you want, spoiler alert, the film is funny. It's absolutely uproarious, and I love it, but yeah. I'm going to have to redo that. Because I knew that would happen. I knew it would happen. Let's see. I'm going to make sure I got all the names correct here. Because there's at least 9 principal characters here. And they're all like... And the thing is, I don't want to like overlook any of them. Because they all have like their funny moments here. Because I knew I messed up with... Yeah, Clifton was not the one I was thinking of. It was Dwayne. That was it. Yeah, I didn't want to get that wrong because Clifton is a much different character. Okay. All right, I think I got up on my notes up here. All right, take 2 on this. Okay. Let's try this again. All right. So in 3, 2, 1. So, The Blackening is a horror comedy in which the entire central cast is black characters. And of course, like, the marketing for this has been keen to point out that, like, they recognize, like, the horror trope of how, like, like, the black people are the first to die in a horror film. And the marketing has laid into this thick by... I got a bug there. Ah, goodness. So many takes I gotta do with this. Doesn't help that it's hot as hell. My god. Like, I'm shooting this in a basement where it's wicked cold and it's still freaking hot in here. Okay. 3rd time's the charm. Let's get rid of that bug that got in here. Alright. Okay, let's try this one more time from the top. So in 3, 2, 1. So The Blackening is a horror comedy in which the entire central cast is black people. And the marketing has been keen to point out that, this is a horror film that wants to poke fun of that old horror cliche about how the black people die first. Well, as the poster has revealed for this film, like, well, you can't kill us all first if it's all black people, then what? So I was kind of like, I was trying to think about what type of film this would be. Like, was it going to lead more towards like horror satire or more horror parody? And it kind of ends up being a cocktail of both. It starts off kind of like on that satirical note by having a familiar setup. It's a cabin in the woods. It's far off in like in the woods, and it's in the darkness. It's in a fairly unpopulated area, which is like a perfect opportunity for like a killer to strike. So when the killer first strikes, the killer plays a little bit of a game and asks the first victims, can you name a film in which the black people survive? And the answer they gave is Scream 2, which, if you're familiar with your horror movie knowledge, the black people are the first to die in Scream 2. So, yeah, so it has like that Scream element about like, characters who are fairly familiar with horror movies, but at the same time making all the familiar mistakes. And there's a bit more of that throughout the film, but also more of like a silliness to try to like, play up on those tropes and kind of like, basically have like a bit of like gallows humor to it. So you have a group of friends who are meeting up for a reunion in the woods, and you get to know a whole bunch of them and get to like love them a lot before the killer comes back into the picture, which is great. Usually, if you didn't like the characters, this would be the most boring part of the film because you're a little bit edgy. You're like, oh god, when are they going to get to the kills? Like, I don't really care about these characters. I can't wait for them to get to be killed off. And here you get to know and like enough of the characters. Like, you get to know Lisa and the fact that she's debating whether she wants to get back together with her ex. You have Allison, who feels like a little bit out of place for being mixed race among her friends who keep bringing it up all the time. You have Dwayne, who is just like a little bit of like a mild party animal. Like he's a bit like, they establish him as being like a little bit more introspective and sensitive. But if you get the right drugs in him at the right time, he can be all about partying. He's one of those like those party goers who needs like drugs to actually like turn on and like turn up a party to be more fun. They also bring up the ex-boyfriend is Namandi, who they establish as being actually from Africa for his name. And he's played up as being like, this person who's a bit unfaithful, a bit untrustworthy, but he's trying to get his life together. So the other characters don't really trust him all that much, but they're very much on the fence. Even Lisa's like, I don't know if I really want to get back together with him, but I don't know, I got stuff to patch up. So there's a little bit, so you have some romantic tension going on there. You also have King, who's like the more aggressive party animal. Like if Dwayne is the character who, needs a little something for the party to get started, King is the person who will supply it. But not well. Like King's plans for starting off like the reunion for partying is to make this drink that combines way too much vodka with way too much Kool-Aid. and of course, like, everyone's like, this is going to give you diabetes. Do not drink this. And everyone who takes it is like, oh, it's the worst thing ever. And then more of like a drunk partier is Shanika, who's a lot more eccentric, a lot more, like the fun, like the fun girl who like immediately encouraged everyone to get into the party. And then kind of like balancing out the rest of the friends is kind of a little bit of the outsider is Clifton, who is kind of like the very like the nerdy black friend who really does kind of like play up that Urkel vibe. Like it gets to an absurd degree with how geeky they try to make this guy, to the point where you almost feel bad for him. You almost do. So as they reconnect and they have a little bit of fun partying, they notice that weird things start happening in the house. The doors start locking. There's something strange in the basement. and there's this racist board game down in the basement that forces them to play this game of trying to determine how black they are and killing them off if they don't answer correctly. So it's and this leads, of course, it has like an interesting aspect of like having, you know, like this racial allegory over everything, but at the same time, it's also just funny for like the gallows humor that comes about, because like at the same time, like, you know, it's so much shocking that, you know, they're forced to play this game, but at the same time, it's funny for how, like, you know, like they get really, you know, proud of themselves that they know this stuff, and then feel terrible about themselves when they don't know this stuff that they feel that they should know as black people. It's the one thing that this made me think of was that there's an episode of Martin in which they try to like call the cops and try to like convince the cops that they're white so that they'll be taken seriously, and at least in this kind of like Family Feud style game of trying to prove to the cops that they're white. The Blackening's entire like first act with the killer is like the complete opposite of that. It's this entire black group of friends trying to prove to a killer that they are black by knowing stuff like how many Aunt Vivs there were on Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, and knowing like all the verses of the Black National Anthem. And then like I don't want to reveal all the questions here, but there's a beautifully hilarious punchline to the question, name 5 black actors from Friends, which is which has like the best punchline, so I don't want to ruin it here. But yeah, like the humor here is like, it's fast and vicious to the point where it's just like, you know, like there's a point in the third act where the film kind of just like settles for being less of a satire and more of like a parody that wants to kind of like, you know, like be more silly, and also kind of like gut the typical horror tropes that you would expect for who would be the killer in this scenario and who not to trust in these situations. And by that point in the film, like it feels like it would get stale and that you wouldn't be as into it. But the fact that this cast works so well, like they have amazing chemistry playing off of each other, and they know how to deliver these lines in a way that just makes you laugh so hard that like at that point this is like, you know what, if the film wants to like, you know, wrap it up in this way, like there is a twist to who the true killer is here, but about midway through you can kind of see it coming with how it's framed here. But in terms of the humor here, like it doesn't err on like the safe side. It goes for the, like I said, it's gallows humor, so it directly goes for like, you know, humor based around like race and politics and cultural trends, and it does not hold anything back. Like, it is incredibly gutsy what they want, the type of humor they want to evoke in this film. Like at one point, like one of the funniest bits is where the killer gives them a choice of like, send out a person to die, and it has to be the person who is the least black among you. So the killer is trying to pit everyone against each other by like determining how black they are and what they know. And it's weird how they debate, like, you know, like they want to try to like live, so they try to like offer excuses about how they're not that black. And at one point, like, I won't reveal which character, but one of them like gives like the one response where they're just like, okay, you need to go, which is like one of them says like I you know, I guess I'm not that black. I mean, I voted for Trump twice, and they're like, oh, you gotta, we don't even care if you're not black. You gotta, and there's a lot of like weird humor like that. Like there's also very well, it's not really weird humor, it's more like topical humor, but there is very knowing humor about like the horror genre. Like at one point, they're not quite sure if they want to place their trust in the local police, who you know, who's called Officer White, played by Diedrich Bader. They're not quite sure if they should trust this guy because, like, you know, there's a killer out in the woods. They don't know, like, he's like a stranger to them, but like Bader's performance, like, he tries to put on like this you know, he tries to like prove that, like, you know, he's an ally, but they're still kind of like, I don't know, like, because these are people who have seen like Jordan Peele's like Get Out, so they're just kind of like, I don't know, I've seen Get Out. Like, if this guy says like I voted for Obama twice, we don't know if we can trust him. And there's even like little sentiments of that the officer will say where like that the officer will say where like the group is like, I don't know if we should put down our weapons with this guy. Maybe I don't know. No, wait, no. That I'm not sure if we can trust him. So there's kind of an interesting like play about like, you know, like I said, it has like that Scream aspect of like, you know, determining who to trust in a horror movie, and the characters here are fairly aware of horror movie tropes where they're just like, let's err on the cautious side. And sometimes they're right to be cautious and it does save them, and other times it doesn't. Like they're a little bit too cautious and having like, you know, their sense of like trust and safety more informed by you know, like by media and culture and stuff like that it blows up in their faces here. So it's very much, you know, there's a lot of moments here where I was just laughing so hard. This is definitely one of those kind of like horror films that is great to see with like a crowd. So if you are going to see this, I would say like see it in the theater, and if you don't, watch it with a group, because it's a lot of fun on that level. And also, like, I probably should have mentioned this from the get-go, but like the group is gathering together for a reunion to celebrate Juneteenth, and there's a bit of humor they play up with that as well. So it's just I will say this though, if you're going into this film and expecting it to be like an ultra gory, you know, typical type of horror film in that capacity, you're gonna be let down. However, if you like to see a horror comedy that can poke fun at the genre, but also still, you know, kind of have like its own brand of satire to it, this film really works. Like, I mean, in terms of like a horror or comedy, this definitely airs more on the side of like comedy, only because I was laughing so hard at this, and like the back and forth between the characters is brilliant. The way they determine what they're supposed to do in a house where the power gets shut off and the doors are locked and they're being stalked by killers outside, and they got crossbows and voice changers, and just debating what they should do in every scenario, and bickering and having just absolutely hilarious conversations. Like at one point they're bickering about what type of music they know, and they bring up the O'Reilly Auto Parts theme song, and they kind of like bitterly sing it to each other because like they just can't help themselves. So just like wonderful moments like that make the third act, which kind of like settles for like the twist that you would expect here, and not to mention like the absurdity of how Clifton is framed. It kind of works for those laughs. Like I mean, like I said, a great cast can save a, you know, like a fairly like routine or lukewarm plot. And here, I feel like the writing is good, but I feel like it only comes together as well as it does here just because it's so damn funny. It is so hilarious watching everyone, you know, everyone, like, I'll just go down the whole cast here. Like, Grace Byers, Jermaine Fowler, even though Jermaine Fowler is playing it up way too much as Clifton, I think he does a great job. Melvin Gregg is great as kind of like King, as like a more grounded person in all this. Ex Mayo as Shanika is hilarious for like the lines that she doles out here. Dwayne Perkins as Dwayne, also a lot of fun to the party. Antion Robertson as Lisa is great for like kind of like, it feels like she could, you know, it almost feels like she's kind of like playing up a little bit more of like the straight romantic drama, even though she does have a lot of funny lines in here as well. She sells that performance to make you believe that she and Namandi would have a relationship. Namandi, played by Cinqua Walls, I believe it is. Great performance there. Like, and just like just the way that like King tries to sell everyone on like his Kool-Aid drink is just beautiful, thanks to Melvin Gregg's performance. And then you have what was it name, like Jay Farrow as Sean. As Sean, and Yvonne Orji as Morgan, who play the opening characters. Don't have a lot of screen time, but they have decent back and forth for the little screen time that they have here. And of course, Diedrich Bader is always funny. Just Diedrich Bader has this natural element to just play it straight, and that's all you need to do. And he does it here beautifully. To like sell his character as someone you're not quite sure if you could trust, and also someone who's just like genuinely funny on a dry level here. So everything in this film just kind of like fires on all cylinders here in terms of like the comedy. And I feel like, you know, hey, if you're gonna lean into like the hilarious aspects of the scenario, you got to go in hard. You got to sell those jokes. They can't just be like, you know, like typical, semi-topical jokes and like kind of like safe humors, like, or here's like a fart joke here or a drug joke there. The film never settles that easily. Like, to be fair, there are some drug jokes here, especially in the third act, where one of them is on Adderall. There are some boozy jokes, and the bulk of all the comedy here, especially because it plays into the big twist here, the bulk of the comedy is all about race. And if you're up on that, if you like that type of humor, this will hit it out of the park for you. And just the fact that this film has guts with the type of comedy that it's trying to evoke here, like it never feels like it's falling back on easy laughs. It works so well. I had a blast watching this. It is absolutely a film you need to watch with the crowd. So yeah, The Blackening is a hoot. That sounds too silly. I don't care. The Blackening is fun, people. It's fun. It's fun and hilarious. So yeah, The Blackening is currently playing in theaters right now. Go check it out if you can. In fact, it's probably going to be disappearing from a few theaters since it wasn't that high on the box office. I mean, it did all right. I mean, it's a cheap horror film, and of course, you know, those do well at the box office. But it's summer, and those tend to, you know, kind of come and go. So if you do get a chance to, I'll say this: if you do get a chance to go see the film, go see it late at night. Go see it with a midnight movie crowd who are just gonna like just have a ball with it. Get your friends together and to watch it if you can. Because I feel like I watched it with the crowd, I had a blast. But I feel like if I were to watch it alone, I'd be like, it's pretty good. I mean, I laughed a lot of times, especially at the punchline for the can you name any black characters from Friends? Oh my goodness. Okay. And now, maybe I should have done Asteroid City first. Because I know that, like, I threw my voice a little bit too far on the Blackening, so... Yeah. Okay. Speaking of huge cast lists, this one's even bigger. So let's make sure I got all my notes here. Okay. Alrighty. So I think we're ready for Asteroid City. And here we go in 3, 2, 1. So, Asteroid City is the latest comedy from Wes Anderson. And of course, it has all the things you expect from a Wes Anderson film. It has a big ensemble cast. It has that dry humor we've come to expect. It has that kind of, trapped in a different era type of like style to the characters and to the setting and the humor here. But what actually impressed me more about this film, and this is kind of going to be where it divides some people, is that Asteroid City feels like a more blunt and kind of like grounded film in terms of being about existential dread, and actually takes some big leaps with how it stages this story. So the key thing to know about this film is that it takes place within. It's kind of framed a little bit how Rushmore would set up like the play. And this film is weird. Like, it sets up like the story of Astro City is a play, and then it shows you the behind the scenes of kind of like the play. It's basically like the movie within the movie, more or less. So basically, it's the story. The core story here, the one that's in color, is that there's this small little town called Asteroid City in the middle of nowhere. It's during the 1950s. It's during like the whole, excitement for like, the space race and the space age. And basically a whole group of people have congregated in Asteroid City for a big junior science fair with all these very intelligent kids who have devised these really cool science experiments. Like, it feels like these these students should not be making these. Like they literally make like a ray gun and a device that can like put graffiti on the moon. Just all these excessive, ridiculous contraptions here. And they call it Asteroid City because there is a there is a meteor that has crashed here. Apparently, many like thousands of years ago, and they've built a little town around it and called it Asteroid City, hoping that it'll become a city. And they believe that there might be alien life out there, and sure enough, amid this science fair, an alien pops by. But here's the thing. That's just kind of like the framing device for how all the characters will be in this particular area and what keeps them in that area for an extended period of time. The core story is about Augie Steenbeck, who's played by Jason Schwartzman. He's a father of three young girls and his teenage son, and his teenage son, of course, is competing in the science event. His name is Woodrow, and he's played by Jake Ryan. And Augie is trying to find the best way during this trip to tell them that their mother died 3 weeks ago. He's been, Augie's just kind of like buried himself in his work as a photographer, and has kind of struggled with trying to find the best way to tell his family. And even then, like even when he's chosen this opportunity here, where he feels like it might be a more cheery atmosphere, it doesn't quite go over as he expected it. Like his girls have like the weirdest reaction to it. Like they're in a state somewhere between like disbelief and kind of believing that witchcraft could help them in this scenario. And Woodrow is just kind of like still processing this information, while at the same time Augie is kind of debating whether or not he wants to keep this family going, especially since his father-in-law, who's played by Tom Hanks, just kind of doesn't really like him and doesn't want him in the family. Like he's not super bitter. He doesn't want to kick him out because he realizes that he has grandkids with this guy, so he wants to kind of love him. But he's just kind of in that angry sense where he just wants to. You can tell he wants to strangle Augie, and he's very much close to that point, but still recognizes that I love the guy, and I gotta kind of gotta try to find some love within him. Now that's basically the setup for like the core story here. There's also like little aspects that contributed to it. Like in particular, Augie starts forming a romance with the washed up actress Midge, played by Scarlett Johansson. And they hit it off kind of like in a little bit of like a meet cute way. Their romance doesn't go from like 0 to 30 like a rom-com or romantic drama where they're a couple by the end, but you can see like the sparks are starting to fly, or like as much romantic chemistry as you would expect from a Wes Anderson film. So they have some pretty cute moments together. Now that's the core story within Asteroid City, but then you also get this separate story that frames Asteroid City as a play, and then you get to hear the story behind the play, delivered by Bryan Cranston acting as a narrator for what seems like they're filming like a TV special about how they've set up the story. And then you get to see like the other actors behind the scene. Basically, it feels like everything going on behind the scenes is basically like all the actors that Wes Anderson usually puts in his films are just kind of like waiting in the wings or hanging off and just taking a role. Like you have like Willem Dafoe plays like an acting teacher. You have Adrian Brody playing the director. You have Edward Norton as the playwright. And they're not given a lot to do. Like they are making the most of their scenes. Jeff Goldblum in particular. Jeff Goldblum really does feel like a character who they don't use. Like they set him up for a character who's going to be used in the play, and then he never gets a moment to shine, which is just like they just kind of like brush by him briefly, which is like beautifully staged. But what's more fascinating about how they set this up is that both of these two worlds represent this kind of like existential dread. In a few ways, in ways that aren't like as apparent, like because when Asteroid City gets visited by the alien, and the alien is just kind of harmless. Like it's got like big adorable eyes and it has no mouth and it just kind of like looks around. It's like, hey, what's up? And then leaves. And then of course everyone freaks out about this and they fear that, you know, this is going to be the end of the world and the aliens are going to come to destroy us. And that we don't know how to process this information. It makes us feel small. It makes us question our own lives. And there's you can sense that a lot within within Augie and Midge, who kind of feel like they just want to escape. Like Augie contemplates wanting to abandon his family, and Midge is contemplating aspects of suicide. So there's like, they have like this thought of like doom in the back of their mind, but also like a desire to find something more to live for, which is kind of like, it's bluntly stated within the film in a few ways. Like, because like at one point there's a scene where Midge talks about how pointless it might all seem, where she feels like maybe humanity is doomed and there's no point to life. And immediately after she says that, Augie, in kind of like desperation to feel anything, places his hand in a waffle iron and just kind of like smashes it down, and just admits like, oh, I felt that, you know, I can feel something. I'm alive. I'm here. And it's like it waffles between like being, you know, like a clever statement about existentialism, while also being that kind of like weird dry humor, but also being very blunt. And the film has a lot of that at times. Like at one point, during Willem Dafoe's like acting school, they quite clearly like stated to the camera, you know, I'm trying to remember like the sentiment. It was like, you can't wake up if you don't go to sleep. So of course, obviously, you don't need to read too much into that. You know, obviously, you know, death and birth are a part of life. You know, yada yada yada. Existentialism comes on you. You know, it makes itself clearly known. And I feel like that's kind of going to be the dividing line for a lot of people with this film. Like, either you appreciate that Anderson is being upfront about this material and presenting this fear of death in his own clever way and very stylish way, or it comes off like too blunt and it feels like the characters are getting lost within that thematic element. And for me, honestly, like, you know, mostly because like I really do love films that have themes that have something big to say and says them in a very not just like a clever and stylish way, but also in a very direct way that touches you to your core. And this film actually kind of did that for me, and it was a big surprise because I wasn't expecting that much out of a Wes Anderson film, to kind of like to basically have like characters look death straight in the face and kind of like find a way to live on. And this is more or less represented when Jason Schwartzman's character, when he's in acting mode, when he's like behind the scenes, he's briefly outside and visits an actor who got cut from the play, and talks about what it's like, you know, to be in a different production and what it feels like to be cut. And basically it's, you know, you don't need to, like I said, you don't need to read too much into it. It's pretty clear that this is, you know, meant to be about a character coming to terms with, you know, letting go of someone and death, both in terms of, you know, internally and externally to this play. So you have that kind of meta nature going here, and it's wonderfully played up, especially when you have Bryan Cranston, who doesn't just serve as the narrator. Like, there's several points where he's like questioning, wait, should I be in this part of the story? Maybe I shouldn't. Or he's questioning like, wait a minute, are you supposed to be here? I don't. You're kind of getting us mixed up here. And then just lots of like, I've barely even addressed the entire ensemble cast here, but there's a lot of funny asides for all the other characters. You have Tilda Swinton playing this scientist who contemplates having children and kind of like has this weird relationship with the teenagers where she's just kind of like, I could have been a mom, maybe, kind of. You have Liv Schreiber. I think I'm saying his name correctly. It's been a while since I've said it, but you have Liv Schreiber playing one of the parents of the smart kids who kind of like, you know, he questions. It feels like he's almost kind of like a tourist within Wes Anderson films who's kind of trying to get used to the vibe and kind of like getting the hang of it as the film goes along. You have the other like parents are kind of neat too. You have Hope Davis and Stephen Park. You have Rupert Friend playing Montana, a singing cowboy in this film, and I don't know, like I'm pretty sure this is probably the first Wes Anderson film in which there's a musical number in the film, which Rupert Friend, and yes, you will get to see him sing to sing a little bit of a country song here for a musical number, which is, it's cute. Like it conveys both like the coming to terms with this new information, but it's also just silly, and it's fun for having that. You have Steve Carell as a motel manager who is trying to get Asteroid City off the ground by literally selling real estate within vending machines, which is clever. Like he tries to like nickel and dime all like the tourists in like the weirdest ways. Like he sets up vending machines for everything. Like, well, I believe like there's a vending machine just for martinis. That is bizarre to see it like function in like this 1950s environment. And then just well, I completely forgot to mention Margot Robbie plays the actor who got cut from the film, which is beautiful. And then of course I've mentioned like, you know, the fun of like, you know, just having Jeff Goldblum in the wings and Adrian Brody and Edward Norton, who all do great jobs. So I doubt I have to say. And then of course, you know, a few other familiar actors round out the cast, you know, like Sophia Lillis and Bob Balaban are there. So yeah, just a quirky, fun cast, and you expect those asides there that act like nice little fun chasers. So, oh, also, I completely forgot. I can't glaze over. How could I forget? Jeffrey Wright as the military commander is great, just because he's perfectly suited for this type of film where he basically just has to have like that kind of like stern, you know, the stern military man who doesn't quite know what he's doing in the 1950s and doesn't know how to handle an alien threat, and it just kind of like relies on like going by the book and just being very analytical. So he works so well here, especially after him being added with like the French Dispatch. It's kind of interesting to see him play that kind of like a little bit more of like a comfier character, because within the French Dispatch he was clearly trying to do James Baldwin. He was clearly trying to do that, and here this is a little bit of like just like a character where you just have to be stern, your dialogue has to be quick, and you gotta have a little bit of a grumpy edge under there. And yeah, he works so well here. Just the entire cast here works so well. I doubt I have to say this too. Like, it's beautifully shot and framed. Like the very bright the very bright colors with, you know, like the dusty plains highlighted by like the deep blue sky is just gorgeous to look at. The framing of like, you know, having these wide open spaces and then having odd things like an unfinished part of road and a motel where like they don't have all like the rooms all quite set up, and having the weird crater. It was very interesting to see how Wes Anderson frames all this kind of like empty space and frames his characters beautifully against it. That it's fascinating, and not to mention the fact that the film takes so many risks with what it's adding here, like a musical number, and there's a CGI Roadrunner at one point added, not as like a big aside, just kind of like a little bit of like a quirky animal character off to the side. So it does try out some new stuff that I haven't seen in a lot of Wes Anderson films, but for its overall theme of being, you know, about coming to terms with life and, you know, these characters facing an existential dread and being very upfront about it within, like, you know, Anderson's own weird way and style of kind of like setting this up as a play and treating it like a play and framing everything around it as a play. It works so well, and I guess like I like how it's framed that way, because again it gave me a little bit of those Rushmore vibes. So yeah, this is honestly like this is gonna leave people very polarized, because it takes risks that you don't see as often in a Wes Anderson film. But for going that extra mile and trying out this new stuff, this is honestly like top tier Wes Anderson for me. This is right up there for me with like the Royal Tenenbaums and Rushmore and what's the Grand Budapest Hotel. It's up there with like the A-listers of Wes Anderson. And you know, like it's easy to say that after having seen all of his films, but I'm debating whether or not it will be my favorite Wes Anderson film. I feel like I'm gonna have to watch it a few more times, but as it stands right now, with the way that the film is framed. I love it. I love how it treats these characters. I love how they're framed. I love how it plays with material and breaks the fourth wall and isn't afraid to just be up in your face with what it's trying to say. And for nothing else, it's got to have one of the larger ensemble casts here, just for all the talents assembled. Like I barely even mentioned like the other. I think I mentioned them all, didn't I? Yeah, no, I forgot Hong Chow as who is he? He was Schubert's wife in the film. She's pretty good. She's good. Like I said, there's a huge cast, and a lot of them do fight for screen time. And that was honestly one of my fears with this film, was that this cast is so huge. I'm wondering how it's going to balance them all, and it kind of doesn't, because it feels like you're going to have to push a few off to the side here, but doesn't push them too far off to the side. And I feel like that helps that you segment up these characters to kind of give them their own little vignettes. I don't quite want to say like vignettes, because I don't want to like set it up like it's, like it's like the French Dispatch, in which they're like, okay, here's this person's story and here's this story and we're going to move on to this story. No, it feels like there's a core story here, and then there's like a B, C, and D plot that are going on around the same time, that are not like overbearing, and they don't feel like they're inexplicable in how they're framed. So at least that's the way it came out for me, just because like the characters are framed in a way where they are relatable. So it's not just weird stuff happening for the sake of it being weird. Although the science experiments are so bizarre. But that's the kind of absurdity that you'd like to see in this type of film. So at least for me, I really appreciate it. So yeah, as far as I'm concerned right now, my opinion might change a few years from now the more I watch it. But as it stands now, this is top tier Wes Anderson. So yeah, Asteroid City is I'm not going to say a blast. It's a great movie. It's a great Wes Anderson movie. So yeah, Asteroid City is currently playing in a few theaters right now, and it will be opening up wide this weekend. So yeah, I highly recommend Asteroid City. I have not excuse me. I have not taken a look at the Rotten Tomatoes score for it, but I can pretty much tell you it's probably going to be lower than Wes Anderson's other films. Just because it's not a safe Wes Anderson film. I'll say that. It's not safe. It's trying stuff, So if you were counting on something like the French Dispatch, which honestly is kind of bland for me, I wasn't that big of a fan of it, but yeah, it's not safe Anderson. But hey, if you want to see the director try out something new, this is the way to go. Okay, so I think that's all that I have for this week, I think. Yeah, I think that is. There were a few... I'm trying to think, was there... There were a few other films I watched that I was debating whether I was going to talk about. I was going to talk about Flamin' Hot, the story of like the guy who came up with Flamin' Hot Cheetos, but I debated on it, and I feel like I want to make it part of like a bigger conversation about films, about the business of businesses, because I wanted to compare it to the Nike film we got this year called Air, which I think would be like great to see how these films stack up to each other and how they try to reframe these giant corporations that had these milestones and breakthroughs, So yeah, I'm kind of planning on doing a video on that later. So yeah, let's do a little bit of a recap here. Let's see. Let's get a little bit of music going. Where's the music? There it is. Okay. So, let's do a recap of the films that we reviewed on today's show. There we are. We reviewed Elemental, the new Pixar animated film. It's not as great as Turning Red or Inside Out, but it's definitely up there with... It's a very solid Pixar film, and it does the stuff that I love to see these animated Pixar films do, which is present a world that I've barely seen before with a theme and emotions that you don't see as present in other family animated films. So I very much enjoyed that. We also reviewed The Blackening, a horror comedy with very much racial gallows humor, and I could not stop laughing at this film. The jokes are so fast and funny that it's honestly hard to pick apart. Like I mentioned that my favorite joke was involving, poking fun at friends, but there's way more to it than that, and I don't want to spoil it here, so go see it for yourself. And I also reviewed Asteroid City, Wes Anderson's new film, a bit of a 1950s satire that frames itself as a play about existential dread and does some stuff that I didn't expect a Wes Anderson film to do. Amazing cast though, but it's a Wes Anderson film. I doubt I have to spell that out. So I absolutely loved it. It's definitely going to be one of my top Wes Anderson films. So there you go. This week, all three films are so damn good. Among all of them, I would say the one that you should definitely see is Asteroid City. Mostly because it's going to be coming out this weekend, and I think it's already playing in a few limited theaters. So that mostly means just New York and LA, maybe a few smaller places if you have art house theaters in your part of the country or wherever you are. But yeah, it'll be opening wide this weekend. But yeah, if you can't wait till then, go check out The Blackening or Elemental. Great films. Would highly recommend them over The Flash, which dominated the box office from the last weekend. To a disappointing gross. But yeah, all three films are great. You can't go wrong with any of them. But Asteroid City is the number one I recommend. So I will be back in 2 weeks, and what we'll be reviewing then? We will be reviewing the latest Indiana Jones film, The Dial of Destiny. We'll also be reviewing Mission Impossible: Dead Reckoning Part 1. I think it's still called Part 1. Or did they do an Across the Spider-Verse thing where it's they put a Part 1 on there, but then they took it off so that everyone would be surprised. I mean, I knew that it is the first trailers had Part 1 in it, but then they didn't have the second part in the actual title, so shocked people, I guess. Maybe they were they looked at Dune and they were like, hey, Dune didn't do a Part 1. Maybe we should do that too. Yeah. I mean, it worked. I guess everyone went to it, They weren't just oh, I gotta see this as a bridge film. Because that's what it is. Across the Spider-Verse is a bridge film. So yeah. That's what I'll be reviewing. Mission Impossible, Indiana Jones: The Dial of Destiny, and something else. All right. So if you want to check out any of my reviews, I also do written reviews at movieswithmark.com, filminquiry.com, and twincitiesgeek.com. The reviews as singular videos should be out later this week. I've been trying to get those out more promptly, just because it makes sense to get these reviews out early before people go see them in the theater, so they know what to go see. And since Asteroid City is coming out, got to make sure everyone knows it's a damn good Wes Anderson film. So a brief thank you to Agent Rainstorm, who subscribed during the stream. So thank you so much for following. And if you dug the stream, be sure to do what Rainstorm did here and subscribe, or hit the like button if you'd like to see more early movie reviews. I was debating whether or not to talk about a spoiler review of The Flash, but then I got to thinking about it, and I started writing a big script for it, so there'll be a video of that coming soon. There's tons of videos I'm working on. So yeah, if you also really want to support what I do, I also have a Patreon where I offer access to some other scripts that I've written and some early reviews, as well as access to the books that I'm writing. I'm currently writing a book on Saturday morning cartoons, so if you'd like to check that out, stop on by there and see what it's all about. Okay. Well, that should do it for this stream, so I'll check back with you in 2 weeks where we will be reviewing Indiana Jones and Mission Impossible. And maybe some other stuff. We'll see. It's It'll be July by then, and there will no doubt be plenty of films come July. So, yeah. So, yeah, like and subscribe if you want to see more early movie reviews to stay up to date on the latest movies. And I'll be back in 2 weeks for more of this fun stuff. Alright, so I'll catch you later, folks. You have a Megaforce summer.